The heartbeat of ancient blood. Close your eyes for a moment. Feel your heartbeat. Steady, rhythmic, alive. That pulse beneath your skin, the rise and fall of your breath, the warmth in your chest. It's not just modern biology at work. It's ancient machinery, still humming, still functional, still echoing the distant footsteps of your ancestors who walked the earth tens of thousands of years ago. Right now, as you sit reading this, your body is expressing genes that were forged in a world lost to time, not in metaphor, in molecular reality. Inside you are instructions written not just by your parents, or your grandparents, or even your great-grandparents, but by people who lived 47,000 years ago, people who hunted mammoths, lit fires in icy caves, and watched the stars from mountaintops we no longer climb. This isn't poetic exaggeration, it's biology. Because if your ancestry traces outside of Africa, then between 1% and 2% of your genome comes not from modern Homo sapiens, but from Neanderthals, an extinct cousin of humanity. Your immune system, it uses proteins shaped by Neanderthal battles with Ice Age viruses. Your circadian rhythm, the internal clock that tells you when to sleep and wake, it's still influenced by genes inherited from cave dwellers who survived the crushing darkness of glacial winters. Even your skin's reaction to sunlight, how easily you tan, how prone you are to sunburn, has prehistoric fingerprints all over it. We tend to think of ourselves as sleek modern creatures of the digital age, products of civilization, education, and evolution's final chapter. But your genome tells a different story. One written in dust and blood, one shaped not just by survival, but by love, chance, and migration. Because to understand who you are today, you must first understand who you carry within you. 47,000 years ago, something extraordinary happened. As Homo sapiens spread out of Africa and into Europe and Asia, they encountered people who looked a little different. Broad brows, stronger bones, stockier builds. These were the Neanderthals, not monsters, not beasts, but humans, cousins, neighbours. And in that meeting, something else occurred. Something soft, unexpected. They didn't just fight. They didn't just coexist. They touched. Skin against skin, eyes locked in firelight. Laughter shared across languages lost to time. They fell in love. They made families, and they passed on something that would outlast them all. DNA. What entered our lineage in that moment wasn't temporary. It was transformative, and it still lives in you. For decades, Neanderthals were cast as primitive, shuffling, grunting brutes unable to keep pace with clever modern humans. But science has rewritten that story in recent years. Thanks to breakthroughs in ancient DNA extraction, we now know the truth. Neanderthals made tools, they buried their dead, they painted caves, they shared landscapes with our ancestors for thousands of years. And when their bones were tested, when the fragile spirals of their ancient genetic code were finally decoded, scientists found something unexpected. They were still with us, not just in skull shapes or archaeological layers, but in our cells, in our biology, in our very code. According to research from the Max Planck Institute and UC Berkeley, the Neanderthal contribution to the average Eurasian genome ranges from 40 to 60 million DNA letters. That's not a footnote. That's an entire chapter, and yet it's not always obvious. You can't see Neanderthal DNA with the naked eye. It doesn't glow or shimmer, but it's there, silently shaping your immune responses, your physical traits, even how your body reacts to lack of sleep. Think about that for a moment. Every time your white blood cells launch a defense against a virus, every time your body reacts to a new food or climate, every time you feel jet lag or get sunburned, you're experiencing the echo of an ancient adaptation. You are, in part, surviving thanks to battles fought 2,000 generations ago. These aren't old, useless relics. They're active code, still working, still helping or sometimes hurting depending on the context. And they're not just Neanderthal in origin. Some come from an even more mysterious lineage, the Denisovans. Unlike the Neanderthals, who left behind hundreds of bones and archaeological sites, Denisovans are a ghostly presence in the fossil record. We found only a few fragments, parts of a finger, a few teeth, but their DNA lives on, in the blood of modern Tibetans, in the high-altitude lungs of Himalayan Sherpas, in the adaptations that let them breathe where most of us would suffocate. We don't need full skeletons to know they mattered. Their code whispers from the peaks of the world. So, when you look in the mirror, know this. You're not entirely Homo sapiens, not purely modern, not solely shaped by the last few thousand years of history. You're a blend, a mosaic, living fossil. Your veins carry the legacy of encounters written under ancient stars. Your body, this body, is an archive of evolutionary memories, curated not just by natural selection, but by chance meetings, shared shelters, and long-forgotten love stories. You are the heartbeat of ancient blood. And this is only the beginning of your story. The day we met the Neanderthals. It didn't happen with a trumpet blast. There were no banners, no lines drawn in the sand. The day modern humans met Neanderthals was not marked in stone or fire. It likely began quietly a figure in the distance, the glint of eyes from across a riverbed, footprints beside unfamiliar ones in soft mud. This was not a battlefield, it was a crossroads. Roughly 60,000 years ago, our species Homo sapiens pushed out of Africa for the second time in our history. We wandered into new frontiers, Europe, Central Asia, northern plains cloaked in ice, forests thick with fog, lands already home to others. Those others were the Neanderthals, not monsters, not myth, but people. They had been there for hundreds of thousands of years, shaped by wind and snow and silence, stocky with powerful limbs, adapted to cold, resilient, human. What happened next wasn't an invasion, it was a meeting. And like all meetings between strangers, it held the full spectrum of possibility. Curiosity, caution, perhaps fear, perhaps wonder. The story we once told of humans as clever conquerors and Neanderthals as doomed brutes is fading. It doesn't hold up under the weight of new evidence, because DNA doesn't lie, and what it tells us is this. We didn't just encounter Neanderthals, we intertwined with them. Imagine it. A cave illuminated by firelight, snow falling outside in silence. Two people, perhaps from different worlds, sitting side by side, sharing warmth, sharing food, sharing stories without words. They were different, yes, but not so different as to be incapable of connection. Their children would prove it. Genetic evidence reveals a stunning truth. Modern humans and Neanderthals interbred multiple times across Europe and Asia. This wasn't a rare accident. It wasn't a scandal or secret. It was part of life. According to studies from UC Berkeley and the Max Planck Institute, this genetic exchange began around 47,000 years ago during a specific window of about 7,000 years. For longer than all of recorded history, our species and theirs lived side by side. And during that long twilight of coexistence, something more profound than competition occurred. Connection. They shared land. They shared tools. They shared children. And those children passed on Neanderthal DNA that now lives in nearly every non-African human alive today. Think of that. If your ancestry traces outside Africa, you are the descendant of a mixed family line. Your great-great-great-grandparents go back far enough, were Neanderthal-human hybrids. You carry the memory of their time together, not in folklore but in your blood. Each cell in your body tells the story of an ancient encounter, a love story, whether brief or enduring, written not in song but in sequence. A, C, T, G. This wasn't always the story scientists believed. For much of the 20th century, Neanderthals were painted as evolutionary failures. They were described as inferior, slower, less intelligent, unable to compete. But the more we learn, the more that myth collapses. They used tools, they crafted jewellery, they buried their dead with care. Some even etched shapes onto cave walls, abstract marks that whisper of symbolic thought. And now we know they were close enough to us to build families. So what did those relationships look like? We may never know the details. No diary survives, no cave painting records their first meeting, but the genetics suggest multiple waves of interbreeding in multiple locations over thousands of years. This wasn't a one-night encounter. It was a pattern, a recurring rhythm. Humans and Neanderthals didn't just brush against each other. They merged again and again. The implications are staggering. Until recently, many believed human evolution was a ladder, one species neatly replacing the next. But the evidence tells a different tale, one of interwoven branches, a braided river, not a straight line. And the Neanderthals were not swept away by some superior tide. They became part of the current every Neanderthal-human union, added a strand to the tapestry of our species, a texture of adaptation, a whisper of ancient insight. Even more astonishing? The flow of genes wasn't one way. Yes, Neanderthal DNA entered the modern human genome, but some studies show that modern human DNA made its way into Neanderthals as well. It was a two-way exchange. According to Princeton geneticist Joshua Akey, some Neanderthals carried genes for brain development that likely came from Homo sapiens. We didn't just take, we shared, and yet not all was peaceful. We don't know the full nature of these interactions. Some may have been consensual, others perhaps not. We must hold space for the complexity of the past, its darkness as well as its light. But what we do know is that these encounters changed us forever, and not just biologically. They challenged the boundaries of what it means to be us and them. They blurred the lines between species and redefined what evolution really looks like. Not conquest, not purity, but entanglement. So the next time you hear the word Neanderthal used as an insult, remember what it actually means. It means you are not just the product of one lineage, but many. It means your existence is built on 1,000 quiet moments of coexistence and curiosity. It means that your ancestors were not just survivors, but bridge builders reaching across genetic divides, crafting something new, something enduring. They met in a world colder, darker, and more dangerous than ours, and still they found warmth. They found each other, and in doing so, they made you, who were the Neanderthals and Denisovans, before they became fragments in your blood, before their genes were passed in silence from mother to child. Through campfires and migrations, wars and winters, there were names we never knew. Neanderthal, Denisovan, two shadows in the deep prehistory of our species, two cousins who once breathed the same air, walked the same trails and watched the same sun rise over the same mountains. We now carry pieces of them. But who were they? What kind of lives did they live? What did they see and feel and believe in the quiet vastness of a world untouched by modern noise? This chapter is not about our inheritance, it's about the givers. Let's begin with the Neanderthals. Their name comes from a valley in Germany, Neanderthal, where their bones were first unearthed in 1856. At first they were misunderstood. Their thick skulls and heavy brow ridges were mistaken for signs of savagery. To Victorian scientists, they were brutish beasts, cave-dwelling failures of evolution. But bones don't lie. And over time, as more Neanderthal skeletons emerged from the earth, across Spain, France, Croatia, Israel, and Siberia, a different story came into focus. These weren't monsters. They were a human species, just different. Homo neanderthalensis. They evolved in Europe and Western Asia around 400,000 years ago, long before Homo sapiens ever set foot there. They survived in icy landscapes. They hunted mammoths and reindeer. They made stone tools, sophisticated, purpose-built tools crafted with care and planning. They used fire. They constructed shelters. They cared for their injured. One skeleton, found in Shanidar Cave in Iraq, belonged to a man who had survived multiple injuries, a withered arm, a crushed eye socket, a missing leg. He had lived long after these wounds should have killed him. Why? Because someone took care of him. That's not brute behaviour, that's compassion. They buried their dead, sometimes with flowers, sometimes with tools, sometimes, perhaps, with ritual. And in a cave in Spain more than 60,000 years ago, Neanderthals left behind something astonishing. Rings of stalagmites deliberately broken and arranged deep in the darkness, far from natural light. What was it? A temple? A gathering place? A mystery? Whatever its purpose, it was art. It was meaning. It tells us that Neanderthals were not only survivors, they were thinkers, builders, creators of memory. They lived in small groups, family bands of 10 to 30 individuals. They spoke. We don't know the words, but they had the anatomical features for speech. They hunted in teams, communicated, made plans, and perhaps, in ways we're only beginning to understand, they dreamed. And then there were the Denisovans. Where Neanderthals left footprints, Denisovans left only whispers. Until 2010, we didn't even know they existed. Their discovery came not from rows of skeletons, but from something far more fragile. A sliver of pinky bone buried in a cave in the Altai Mountains of Siberia, Denisova Cave. From that one tiny fragment, scientists extracted DNA, and what they found stunned the world. This was not a Neanderthal, not a modern human, but a previously unknown branch of the human family tree. Another cousin. They were named Denisovans after the cave, because we had no other name to give them. To this day, we've recovered only a few bones, a molar, a fragment of a skull, a jawbone from the Tibetan plateau. No complete skeleton, no tools we can definitively call their own, no cave paintings, no burial sites. And yet, they're inside us. Their DNA lives on in people from East Asia, Melanesia, the Philippines, and most strikingly in Tibet. From this ghost species, we inherited genes that help us survive the extremes. One gene in particular, TPS1, allows Tibetans to breathe high-altitude air with low oxygen levels without getting sick. It's like a built-in high-altitude engine, and it didn't evolve in Homo sapiens. It came from the Denisovans. Just like Neanderthals, Denisovans interbred with modern humans, and astonishingly, they also interbred with Neanderthals themselves. In fact, one bone fragment from Denisova Cave belonged to a girl with a Neanderthal mother and a Denisovan father, the first known first-generation hybrid in human history. So who were they? The truth is, we still don't fully know. Neanderthals walked thousands of miles. Denisovans walked further still. Traces of their DNA have been found as far as Papua New Guinea. They adapted to frigid mountains, lush forests, and tropical islands. They lived in a world untouched by cities, machines, or metal. They knew fire, they knew cold, and they knew us because we met, we mingled, we made families. What makes this so extraordinary isn't just that they lived, it's that they're not gone. Yes, their species disappeared. The last known Neanderthals vanished from Gibraltar. About 40,000 years ago, Denisovans may have lasted longer in remote places, but no bones remained to mark their final moments. There was no funeral for their kind, no record of their passing. And yet, they live in your cells, in the oxygen in your lungs, in the antibodies that defend your blood, in the shade of your skin, the curl of your hair, the rhythm of your sleep. The Neanderthals were not monsters. The Denisovans were not myths. They were people mothers, fathers, hunters, artists. They walked with purpose. They loved. They suffered. They healed. They saw lightning storms roll across wide plains. They watched auroras shimmer in glacial skies. They taught their children how to make fire, shape stone, listen to the wind. And when they met us, our ancestors, they gave something no other species has ever given, a living part of themselves, not in statues, not in stories, but in you, the 2010 breakthrough that changed everything. It began in silence, a quiet room, a bone fragment, not much to look at, just a piece of ancient femur, chalky with time, no voice, no name, just stillness, waiting. But inside that fragment slept a secret that would rewrite everything we thought we knew about being human. The year was 2010, the place, the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology in Leipzig, Germany. The team, a group of scientists armed not with spears or shovels, but with microscopes, algorithms, and impossible patience. What they were attempting bordered on science fiction. To read the DNA of someone who had died over 40,000 years ago. Not just any someone, but a Neanderthal. Until then, Neanderthals were the ghosts of textbooks, a few skulls, a few tools, an idea half-formed, shaped more by imagination than data. We thought we knew them. They were the other humans, the ones who didn't make it, extinct, gone. But bones can speak if you know how to listen, and in 2010 we learned how. Extracting ancient DNA is not like reading a modern genome. It's not crisp and complete, it's broken, scattered, damaged by time, water, heat and decay. Every step is fragile. Bones must be handled with surgical care. The slightest contamination from skin, breath, even a fingerprint can destroy centuries of preservation. But after years of effort, pioneered by scientists like Svante Pääbo, a name now etched in the story of human evolution, they succeeded. They didn't just recover fragments of ancient code, they sequenced the Neanderthal genome, 3 billion letters, just like yours. And then came the moment no one was prepared for. When they compared the Neanderthal DNA to modern human genomes, specifically those of people from Europe and Asia, they saw something astonishing. A match, not just a resemblance, a presence. Neanderthal DNA wasn't just a fossil memory, it was alive, inside us. It was a revelation that echoed across the scientific world. For decades, the dominant theory held that modern humans had entirely replaced Neanderthals, outcompeted them, driven them to extinction, left no trace. But this data told a different story, a deeper one, a more intimate one. The truth was undeniable. Humans and Neanderthals had interbred, and the evidence was in our blood. According to the 2010 study, between 1% and 4% of the DNA in people of non-African ancestry could be traced directly back to Neanderthals. That may sound small, just a sliver, but consider this. Your genome is made up of 3 billion base pairs. Even 2% Neanderthal ancestry equals roughly 60 million letters of ancient code still shaping your biology today. 60 million! That's not a ghost. That's a legacy. And this legacy wasn't static. It was active. Neanderthal genes weren't buried, dormant relics. They were busy, contributing to your immune system, your skin tone, your sleep patterns, and beyond. What was once myth became measurable. What was once speculation became science. The Neanderthals had not vanished. They had merged. The implications rippled far beyond anthropology. Medical researchers began combing through modern genomes, mapping where Neanderthal DNA remained and what it did. Some Neanderthal genes seemed to strengthen immunity, helping humans resist ancient viruses like coronaviruses. Others were linked to metabolism, mood disorders, nicotine addiction, and even the ease with which we tan or burn in the sun. One ancient variant, inherited from Neanderthals, is still helping protect modern people from certain pathogens. Another has been associated with increased risk of type 2 diabetes. These were not trivial curiosities. They were clues, reminders that evolution doesn't start fresh. It builds, recycles, rewrites. And sometimes, what once helped us survive can hurt us now. That's the paradox of inheritance. We are not the first owners of our genes, we are the latest tenants. Neanderthals spent hundreds of thousands of years adapting to the environments of Ice Age Europe and Asia. They built genetic defences against bitter cold, starvation and disease. When our Homo sapiens ancestors migrated north out of Africa, they were strangers in a harsh land, and then they met the locals. They shared more than space. They shared survival. Through interbreeding, we inherited a genetic toolkit shaped by a different branch of the human story, one that had already faced and adapted to the challenges of the northern world. It was not conquest. It was collaboration written in chromosomes. This breakthrough didn't just reveal Neanderthals, it reshaped us. It showed that modern humans are not a pinnacle, we are a mosaic. We carry the echoes of multiple lineages, Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, and in many the mysterious Denisovans. We're not pure, and that's our strength, because evolution doesn't favour purity, it favours adaptability. The Neanderthal DNA in you is proof that our species survived not by isolating itself, but by embracing difference. In 2022, this breakthrough earned Svante Pääbo the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine, a testament to how far this discovery reached. Not just into the past, but into the very heart of how we understand health, identity, and ancestry. It was no longer a question of if we carried ancient genes. It was a question of how they shaped us and why we need them. So the next time you hear someone say, "We're modern humans," remember this. Your body is a conversation between now and then, a dialogue between ancient frost and modern flame. The bones of a Neanderthal, buried under a glacier for 40,000 years, still speak, and their voice is yours. They live in the way your immune system fights, in how your skin absorbs sunlight, in how your sleep adjusts to the seasons. They are with you not in shadow, but in substance. And all it took to reveal them was a quiet lab, a broken bone, and a few billion letters whispered across millennia. 60 million letters of prehistoric code. You're made of stories. Not just the ones your family tells, not the photographs in drawers or the names etched into gravestones, but deeper stories, older stories, ones written in silence. Inside every cell of your body is a library. It contains 3 billion letters, a language written in 4 characters, A, T, C, G, the blueprint of you. And within that massive text, tucked between chapters written by your parents and grandparents, there are ancient footnotes, passages from another time, sentences not written by Homo sapiens alone. They are the echoes of the Neanderthals, and for millions around the world, these echoes form 60 million base pairs of your DNA. Not dust, not myth, code active, present, alive. Let's pause for a moment and understand what that means. When scientists say that modern non-African humans have 2% Neanderthal DNA, it can sound small, even insignificant, but think again. 1% of a genome that contains 3 billion letters is 30 million letters, 2%? 60 million. That's not a footnote. That's a chapter. It's as if one entire volume in your genetic encyclopedia was written by someone else. Someone who lived 47,000 years ago. Someone who hunted mammoths and huddled around fires. Someone with thick brows and a wide nose, a person your ancestors met, touched and loved. And that person left behind a gift, a library card to their DNA. You carry it now. Here's the part that truly bends the mind. You may share more genetic material with a Neanderthal than with someone sitting beside you. How? Because human DNA is full of variation. We are a species that thrives on difference. Your genome and your neighbour's may only be 99.5% identical, meaning there are millions of small differences between the two of you. But when it comes to Neanderthal DNA, many of those inherited sequences are shared across populations. So, yes, it's possible that the part of you inherited from a Neanderthal 2,000 generations ago is more similar to another modern person's Neanderthal segment than to the DNA you inherited from a cousin just 5 generations back. Think about that. Think about what it means. In the vastness of your biological story, the ancient sometimes feels closer than the recent. But these 60 million letters aren't randomly scattered. They follow a pattern, a signature. When scientists analysed the modern human genome, they found clusters of Neanderthal DNA in predictable places. Some regions of our genome are rich with their code. Others are completely deserted. These empty zones, called Neanderthal deserts, tend to occur near genes involved in reproduction, brain development, and language. Why? Because natural selection is a careful editor. It keeps what is useful. It deletes what causes harm. In many of these desert regions, Neanderthal DNA may have caused problems for early humans, perhaps interfering with fertility or cognitive function, so it was weeded out over generations. But in other regions, the Neanderthal code was not only tolerated, it was treasured. Let's explore some of those places. One group of Neanderthal genes influences your immune system, specifically how your body recognizes and destroys viruses. Another affects the keratin in your skin and hair, possibly helping early humans adapt to colder climates. Some Neanderthal variants affect how you metabolize fat, how easily you get sunburned, or how prone you are to allergies. Still others play a role in circadian rhythms, your internal clock. Are you a morning person or a night owl? Your prehistoric cousins may have cast that vote long ago. These aren't distant effects, they are now effects. They shape your energy, your resilience, biology, every day. One striking study using data from the UK Biobank analysed over 100,000 genomes. It found Neanderthal DNA influencing traits such as height-sleep timing, skin pigmentation, hair texture, mood disorders, nicotine addiction. In some cases, ancient DNA contributed to positive adaptations. In others, it may have left behind genetic baggage, mutations that once helped fight disease, but now increase risk for conditions like type 2 diabetes or depression. That's the trade-off of evolution. A trait that ensures survival in one environment may prove less helpful or even harmful in another. But one thing is clear, these 60 million letters matter. And here's where things get even more fascinating. Different people inherit different sets of Neanderthal DNA. No two modern humans carry the exact same package of ancient genes. One person might have inherited Neanderthal immune defenses. Another may have gotten skin pigmentation traits. Someone else might carry sleep-related variants or ones that affect fat storage. That's why researchers can piece together a kind of genetic mosaic, a map showing how Neanderthal DNA is distributed across modern populations. And when you zoom out, you find something beautiful. Across Europe, Asia, and the Americas, the fragments of Neanderthal code reassemble like shards of pottery across distant ruins, forming the shape of a people who are no longer here but are still part of us. And then there are the Denisovans. In some parts of the world, especially Melanesia, Papua New Guinea, and Southeast Asia, people carry up to 5% Denisovan DNA. That means, in those populations, individuals may carry 150 million letters of DNA from a species we still know almost nothing about, a species we've never even seen in full skeleton, only fragments, yet their fingerprints are there, in the genomes of people living today. They gave us the gene that allows Tibetans to live at 13,000 feet above sea level without falling ill. That's not folklore. That's genetic adaptation, born from interbreeding, refined by millennia, preserved by survival. We didn't just meet our extinct cousins, we blended with them, and their voices are still in the choir of our genome. So the next time you hear someone say, we're all 99.9% the same, remember that 0.1% is a universe. It's 3 million letters of variation. It holds your eye colour, your allergies, your height. It holds your ancestral whispers in those 60 million letters that arrived on cold winds and in firelit caves, carried by people who are gone but not lost. They walk with you. not behind you but within you. Every time your skin reacts to sunlight, every time your body fights a virus, every time your sleep cycle shifts with the seasons, you're reading from a script started long before you were born, a script they helped write. And that is the miracle of it all. Your genome is not clean, it is not pure, it is not singular. It is woven, a tapestry made of choices and chances, of survival, loss, and inheritance. 60 million ancient letters, not written in stone, written in you, ancient love stories, written in DNA. We often imagine history as a series of battles, territories claimed, species conquered, banners raised. But deep in the unrecorded past, long before the first written word, the story of humanity wasn't just a struggle. It was a connection not drawn with swords or borders, but with touch, with family, with love. The Neanderthals and modern humans did not just clash. They embraced, they met under strange skies. They shared food, they learned from one another, and they had children. This wasn't a single night beneath the stars. This wasn't a passing moment. This was a 7,000-year-long encounter, a chapter of intimacy written not in ink, but in DNA. Scientists used to picture our meeting with Neanderthals as brief and brutal, a blink in evolutionary time. But the evidence has evolved. Thanks to advances in genome sequencing, scientists like Priya Morjani of UC Berkeley analysed ancient DNA patterns and uncovered something astonishing. The interbreeding between Homo sapiens and Homo neanderthalensis wasn't a one-time event. It spanned roughly 7,000 years, longer than all of recorded human history. Imagine that. Longer than the Egyptian dynasties, longer than the Roman Empire, longer than every war, kingdom, and nation written in books. For 7,000 years, humans and Neanderthals lived side by side. And during that time, they did more than survive. They intertwined. What does that mean? It means this wasn't merely genetic overlap. It was a relationship. It means that some of your ancestors may have looked into the eyes of someone with a heavy brow ridge and saw not a stranger, but a partner. They saw warmth in those deep-set eyes. They saw safety, wisdom, perhaps even laughter. And they made something new, not just families, but a future. A future that now lives inside you. This long stretch of interbreeding wasn't confined to one place. It happened in waves across Europe, the Middle East, and Central Asia. Each time groups of Homo sapiens migrated into new regions, they encountered Neanderthal communities already adapted to the land. And each time the story repeated: exchange, coexistence, union. This pattern reshaped the human genome in subtle, powerful ways. Your body today carries the marks of those ancient love stories, the architecture of your immune system, your ability to sleep through long winter nights, the way your skin responds to sunlight. All are echoes of relationships that lasted not for years but for millennia. One child at a time, one generation after the next, Neanderthal DNA flowed into the human population. But it wasn't random. Some genes persisted, others were purged. Nature, ever the patient editor, sculpted this hybridization with precision. Genes that provided advantages, stronger immunity, better fat storage, improved skin resilience, were kept. Genes that caused incompatibility, with fertility, reproduction, or cognition, were quietly erased over generations. It was a biological dialogue, one where evolution asked again and again, what helps this child survive? And the answers are still written in your chromosomes. Let's linger for a moment on what this really means. When you dream, when you sweat, when you get goosebumps in the cold, you're not simply acting on modern impulses. You're moving through rituals written by people whose names you'll never know, whose languages are lost, whose bones turned to dust thousands of years ago, but whose genetic gifts never left. Somewhere in your genome, a sequence passed down from a Neanderthal father to his hybrid daughter, from that daughter to her children, and from them, over 2,000 generations, to you. That sequence might govern your metabolism. It might control your ability to detect scent. It might even influence how you feel empathy. Yes, recent studies suggest that some Neanderthal genes affect neurological pathways tied to social behavior, emotional regulation, and pain sensitivity. These were not mere passengers, they were shapers. And then there's the most profound detail of all. We were not alone in our interbreeding. Neanderthals too received modern human DNA. In fact, genetic analysis has shown that around 1–4% of Neanderthal DNA came from Homo sapiens, including genes that may have influenced brain development. This wasn't a one-way exchange. It was reciprocal, two species entwined, learning from each other, becoming parts of each other. One bone fragment found in Denisova cave belonged to a girl whose mother was Neanderthal and father was Denisovan, the first known child of two extinct species. She was the child of a lost love story, a story that never made it into history books, but still lives in the bloodstream of people today. This changes how we see ourselves. We are not the sole survivors of a brutal competition. We are the hybrids of a hidden past. Our success was not due to isolation, but to openness, to connection, to the ability to not only meet the other, but to love them. That love, whether born in peace, necessity, or curiosity, left its mark. A mark that persists in nearly every human outside of Africa today. And not just Neanderthals. People in Melanesia and parts of Southeast Asia carry significant portions of Denisovan DNA. Up to 5% from them, we inherited genes that help us breathe thin mountain air. Genes that affect our immune responses. Genes whose functions we're still decoding. What we know is this. The genetic story of modern humans is not a single thread. It is a braid, a confluence, a chorus. Perhaps that's why this chapter matters so much, because it reminds us that being human has never been about walls or purity or divisions. It has always been about movement, contact, and exchange. Your body is a quilt. Some squares are stitched from Africa's sunlit plains, others from glacial valleys and Siberian winds, each patch a legacy of a meeting, a moment, a memory. When we talk about 7,000 years of interbreeding, we are not talking about numbers. We are talking about nights beside fires, shared meals of roasted meat, shared laughter, shared fear, and eventually shared children. We are the descendants of those unions, not the result of conquest, the result of connection. So the next time someone tries to reduce history to victory and defeat, remind them, the most enduring impact of our meeting with the Neanderthals wasn't who won. It was who stayed, who loved, who mingled, who passed their heartbeats forward into the future, one child at a time. And that future is you. A walking archive of 7,000 years of shared breath, shared blood, and shared becoming. In your bones, the story continues. A viral toolkit from the Ice Age. Your body is a battlefield, not a metaphorical one, a literal microscopic arena. Every second unseen wars rage within you. White blood cells strike like assassins. Antibodies swarm invaders with surgical precision. Signaling molecules scream across your veins like messengers in wartime. And the general behind it all? Your DNA. But not all of it is modern. Some of the most powerful weapons in your immune arsenal were not forged in your own evolutionary line. They were gifts passed down by long-lost relatives who didn't survive the Ice Age, but who made sure you would. When modern humans left Africa roughly 70,000 years ago, they stepped into a new world, a world filled with strange skies, harsh climates, and an invisible threat that would shape the course of our species forever. Viruses, cold weather viruses, animal-borne viruses. Viruses that had never touched the skin of an African-born human. But for the Neanderthals who had lived in Eurasia for over 400,000 years, these enemies were familiar. They had fought them. They had survived them. And their immune systems bore the marks of that long war. So when our ancestors met Neanderthals, They didn't just trade tools or shelter, they traded defenses. It was 2018 when evolutionary biologist David Ennard made a discovery that would transform our understanding of immunity. He found that humans inherited a disproportionate number of Neanderthal gene variants related to viral defense, especially against RNA viruses like those responsible for the common cold, influenza, and coronaviruses. These were not minor influences. These were key regulators of how our immune systems respond to threats. Ennard called it an ancient antiviral toolkit, and it's still active inside you right now. Think about that. Right now, as your immune cells patrol your bloodstream, as your body identifies a virus and begins to neutralize it, there's a high probability that at least part of that immune response was written by Neanderthal hands. It's not a metaphor. It's a sequence of base pairs. And those base pairs may have determined whether your ancestors survived a pandemic or perished in the snow. But why RNA viruses? Because RNA viruses mutate fast. They are tricksters, shapeshifters. They can evolve so rapidly that the immune system is constantly playing catch-up. Neanderthals had lived with them for millennia. Their immune systems had been sculpted by wave after wave of viral siege. So when Homo sapiens began interbreeding with Neanderthals, we downloaded an entire viral encyclopedia, a code library of past battles with footnotes, warnings, and instructions. A Neanderthal immune gene whispered, "This pattern of viral RNA, we've seen it before." And that whisper became your body's war cry. Scientists call these ancient virus-fighting sequences introgress genes. That is, genes introduced into modern humans through interbreeding. And they weren't just random. Natural selection favored the useful ones, kept them, amplified them. Over time, many of these genes became mainstays of the modern human immune system. Some control the production of cytokines, signaling proteins that regulate immune response. Others help T cells recognize viral invaders. Still others manage the timing and magnitude of the inflammatory response. And all of it was shaped by Ice Age pathogens we may never even identify. Of course, not all Neanderthal genes were helpful. Some were too aggressive, triggering autoimmune disorders or chronic inflammation. Others may have heightened risk for conditions like lupus Crohn's disease and type 2 diabetes. That's the paradox of evolution. What helped your ancestors survive the Ice Age might cause your descendants to battle new diseases in a climate-controlled world. But evolution isn't about perfection. It's about trade-offs. Survival in that moment, in that place. And 50,000 years ago, a strong immune response could mean the difference between watching your child grow up or burying them beneath frost-covered soil. Let's pause and go deeper into a specific example. One Neanderthal-derived gene, called OAS1, has been shown to play a vital role in viral immunity. It helps produce an enzyme that breaks down viral RNA, rendering the virus useless. Humans with the Neanderthal version of this gene have shown stronger defenses against viruses like West Nile and even SARS-CoV-2. Yes, that virus. The one responsible for the COVID-19 pandemic. Imagine that. A genetic weapon built to fight Ice Age viruses helped determine who fared better. In a modern pandemic time, it seems, is circular. The past is not past, and the effect is widespread. Studies show that nearly 20% of Neanderthal DNA still active in modern humans involves immune system regulation. That's millions of people whose biology was partly shaped by Ice Age illnesses, and whose descendants still benefit from that design. In a way, your immune system is not just a shield. It's a memory of ancient winters, unknown diseases, desperate survival, a record kept not in writing but in the silent code of your cells. But what's perhaps most incredible of all is this. These genes didn't just help us fight, they helped us adapt because viruses don't just test your body, they test your species. Throughout history, pandemics have wiped out entire populations. Those who survived often did so because of inherited resistance. By blending our DNA with Neanderthals, we inherited more than a physical toolkit. We inherited resilience, a biological flexibility that allowed us to thrive across climates and continents, to build civilizations, to outlive extinction. There's something poetic here, that your ability to survive a fever, to recover from illness, to heal may trace back to a mother who watched her child burn with fever 40,000 years ago in a cave, a father who lived just long enough to pass on a mutation, a tribe who buried their dead, learned and kept walking. We talk of medicine as a modern invention, and it is. But the first medicine was this, inheritance. And that medicine is still with you. Right now, in your white blood cells, in your mucous membranes, in the little dance your T cells perform every time they detect an intruder. That dance was choreographed in the Ice Age by people who never knew your name, but who helped build your defences. Of course, science is still unravelling the details. Not all researchers agree on the magnitude of Neanderthal influence. Some point out that modern environmental factors, diet and epigenetics, may outweigh the genetic baseline, and they're right to be cautious. But even a small boost in immune defense can shift the outcome of a viral encounter. A single gene can save a life, and that gene may have been carried through time like a lantern passed from hand to hand, from mother to son, from hunter to child, until it reached you. So the next time you recover from a virus, the next time your body defeats an infection without you even noticing, remember, you didn't win that battle alone. You were armed long before you were born, armed by ancestors who lived in a world of predators, ice and disease, armed by people who vanished from the earth, but not from its memory. You carry them still, not in your heart, but in your blood. Their legacy is not carved in stone, it's encoded in protein. Your immune system is a monument not to conquest, but to collaboration. And in every antibody, every defense, every recovery, they live again. The armor we borrowed. When Homo sapiens walked out of Africa, they took with them fire, language, and memory. They carried the wisdom of the savannah, the stories of their clans, the pulse of generations in their blood. But they left something behind too, immunity, because evolution writes its code not in theory but in environment, and Africa had shaped their defences. Their bodies had learned to fight its pathogens, its parasites, its predators. But Eurasia was another world, different temperatures, different food, and most dangerously different diseases. To the naked eye, the forests of Europe looked like paradise, moss-draped trees, abundant game, glacial rivers rushing through the land. But beneath the surface of this frozen Eden lived enemies too small to see viruses, bacteria, microbes that had evolved with Neanderthals for hundreds of thousands of years and that saw modern humans as fresh prey. We had never met these pathogens before. We had no blueprint, no resistance. Every cough, every infected wound, every fever could mean death. And for many, it did. But not all, because around 50,000 years ago something extraordinary happened. We met our cousins Neanderthals, and we didn't just clash. We mingled, and through that mingling came an invisible gift. Genetic armor inside their bones was a code that had survived the Eurasian wilderness. Neanderthals had endured Ice Age plagues, unknown viruses, and chronic infections. They were not immune to everything, but what they were immune to, they passed on. Not intentionally, not kindly, but through blood, through children born of two species, children whose DNA whispered survival in new lands. We often picture interbreeding as mythic, romantic, or primal, but in evolutionary terms, it was practical. It was data exchange. Each generation that carried Neanderthal DNA was slightly better prepared, slightly more resistant, slightly more likely to survive the next winter fever. This wasn't about strength, it was about adaptation. and Neanderthal DNA offered the upgrade our immune systems desperately needed. The science is clear now. Studies show that specific introgressed genes, those inherited from archaic humans, were immediately useful to our ancestors, genes that helped recognize viral invaders, genes that calmed runaway inflammation, genes that remembered past enemies. In particular, these genes targeted RNA viruses, the fast-mutating, shape-shifting class that includes influenza, hepatitis, and coronaviruses. You know them well, so did your ancestors. And it was Neanderthal immune genes that gave Homo sapiens a fighting chance. One of the most important elements of this borrowed armour was the toll-like receptor family of genes, TLRs for short. These are frontline scouts of the immune system. They detect signs of infection and trigger the body's alarm systems. And three specific TLRs, TLR1, TLR6 and TLR10, have been linked directly to Neanderthal inheritance. People with these Neanderthal variants respond faster to invading microbes. They mount stronger initial attacks and they're more likely to fend off pathogens before symptoms even appear. These genes didn't just help ancient people, they still help you. They may decide how severely you catch the flu, how quickly you recover from a virus, whether your body hesitates or strikes like lightning. But all armour has weight, and Neanderthal DNA, though protective, came with risks. Some of the same genes that defend us can turn on us, leading to autoimmune diseases, overreactions, inflammation that becomes the illness itself. That's the gamble of evolution. What saves one generation may curse the next. Still, when our ancestors faced unfamiliar European diseases, that gamble was worth it. Better to survive today and let natural selection sort out tomorrow. Let's take a moment to appreciate the stakes. Imagine you're a Homo sapiens child born 45,000 years ago. Your parents migrated north from Africa. They've never known snow, never faced a winter. And you catch a virus, mild to Neanderthals but deadly to you. Except this time you survive. Why? Because one of your ancestors long ago shared a cave with a Neanderthal and shared more than fire. That gene, silent, uncelebrated, passed through generation kicks into gear. Your fever breaks, your lungs clear, you grow up and pass that gene to your children. That's not just immunity, that's inheritance as destiny. This borrowed armour wasn't the only advantage Neanderthals offered. They had already adapted to northern climates, to dark winters, to diets high in meat, to seasonal rhythms unlike anything seen in Africa. And many of those adaptations were biological melanin regulation, fat storage, thermogenesis. But the immune system, that was the most urgent. You can survive hunger, you can survive cold, but without defense against local viruses, you die before you adapt. And so, Neanderthal DNA became a shortcut through thousands of years of slow evolution. It was, quite literally, a lifesaver. Today, about 1 to 2% of your DNA is Neanderthal. That doesn't sound like much, but it translates to 60 million base pairs of genetic instructions. And a meaningful portion of that, according to researchers like David Ennard and Svante Parbo, relates to your innate immune system, not just long-term adaptive immunity, but the ancient brute force mechanisms that detect threats and act fast. These genes are not background noise. They're the reason you sometimes beat a virus before symptoms ever start. They're why some populations had different outcomes during the COVID-19 pandemic. They're ancient armour, still polished and ready. Of course, the story isn't one size fits all. Different populations inherited different Neanderthal gene variants. Some groups also carry Denisovan DNA, another extinct human cousin, offering yet more immune tools. In parts of Southeast Asia and Oceania, people carry up to 5% Denisovan ancestry. Their borrowed genes help fight viruses we don't even understand yet. And they remind us, our genetic past isn't linear. It's a collage. a mosaic of borrowed strengths, accidental blessings, and survival secrets. So what does this mean for you? It means your immune system isn't just yours. It's a hand-me-down, a second-hand shield forged in Ice Age caves and glacial valleys. It's a map of battles you never fought, but somehow won. The next time you get sick and recover, know that someone tens of thousands of years ago did the same. They survived. They passed on their armor, and now it lives in you. Evolution did not make us alone. It made us collaborators. We're not just Homo sapiens. We are the heirs of resilience, the inheritors of borrowed armor, the living memory of those who adapted not just by fighting but by joining forces, reflections in the mirror. Take a moment. Stand in front of a mirror. Look at your reflection. Trace the curve of your cheekbone. Note the shape of your brow, the color of your eyes, the way your skin blushes in sunlight, or how your hair coils, falls, or stays straight in defiance of gravity. You're looking at someone modern, but not entirely. Because stitched into the image staring back at you is a much older story, a story that predates cities and civilizations, one that begins in forests of birch and frost, beneath Ice Age skies, a story written not on your face, but in your genes-by ancestors who are no longer here, but who shaped how you look. When we think of evolution, we often imagine dramatic transformations ape to man, primitive to civilized, as if time scrubs away the old and replaces it with the new. But evolution is not so simple. It is additive. It preserves as much as it abandons. It builds layer upon layer like sediment beneath the earth. And in that layering it leaves fingerprints, not only in your bones or blood, but in your reflection. You may have inherited freckles from a person who lived 50,000 years ago, hair that lightens in the sun from a cave dweller who carved bone tools, a skin tone honed for winters long before the pyramids rose. In recent years, scientists have discovered that Neanderthal DNA still shapes the appearance of modern humans, especially those of European and Asian ancestry, and the traits it affects, they're the very things you notice when you look in the mirror. Hair color, skin tone, tanning ability, freckling, even mood and sleep rhythms, these are not trivial. These are the textures of your identity, and many of them were inherited through ancient love stories and moonlit minglings with a people long gone. Let's start with skin. Your skin is your interface with the world. It guards you, it cools you, it absorbs sunlight and transforms it into life-giving vitamin D. But it also tells a story. For decades, scientists believed that Neanderthals were light-skinned, red-haired cave dwellers, a cold climate adaptation etched into genetic fate. But the truth, as uncovered by large-scale genome studies like the UK Biobank, is more nuanced and far more beautiful. Neanderthal DNA contributes to both lighter and darker skin tones in modern humans. Yes, both. You may be pale and freckled, or golden brown and sun-tolerant. Either way, the blueprint may trace back to ancient Europe and Asia. As researchers explain, multiple Neanderthal alleles affect melanin production, and these genes continue to circulate in human populations today. What this tells us is profound. Neanderthals were not a monolithic people. They were diverse. Just like us. Hair color too is touched by ancient inheritance. Blonde, brown, auburn. Neanderthal genes influence pigment production and distribution, particularly through pathways like MC1R, a gene also associated with red hair and fair skin in modern populations. But here's where it gets fascinating. These variants don't act alone. Modern human genes interlace with ancient ones, sometimes amplifying a trait, sometimes muting it. The result? A mosaic of appearances, each face unique, each strand of hair carrying echoes of the Ice Age. And what about your relationship with the sun? Do you tan easily? Burn quickly? Does your skin freckle under summer skies? You may be reacting to sunlight with an immune system shaped by Neanderthal survival strategies. Research shows that genes affecting sunburn susceptibility and skin inflammation are often introgressed from archaic humans. In fact, a particular Neanderthal variant is associated with a higher frequency of childhood sunburn and lighter tanning ability. This might sound like a disadvantage today, but 40,000 years ago, in mist-covered valleys where the sun was scarce and weak, it was a life-saving advantage. Pale skin absorbs more ultraviolet light critical for vitamin D synthesis in low-light regions. It's not weakness, it's adaptation, a biological response to the very latitude in which one lives. Freckles, too, carry ancient echoes. Those seemingly random specks of pigment aren't random at all. They're signs of melanin clustering, controlled by genes that respond to sunlight. And many of these genes, including those associated with the BNC2 gene, have Neanderthal roots. In some populations, the Neanderthal version of BNC2 increases freckling and sensitivity to UV light. It's possible, though unproven, that someone you've seen with a freckled face and coppery hair is expressing a trait passed down from a love affair in a limestone cave. A gene kissed into existence by Ice Age courtship. But appearance is not only skin deep. Scientists have found Neanderthal influences in sebaceous gland activity, which affects skin oiliness and acne, as well as keratin regulation, which controls the structure of hair and outer skin layers. Ever wonder why some people have strong, coarse hair that grows quickly, while others have finer, more fragile strands? Some of that difference, research suggests, traces back to ancient interbreeding. Let's not forget height. Yes, even how tall or short you are may be partially dictated by Neanderthal DNA. Genome-wide studies show that introgressed genes interact with modern human genes that regulate bone growth, particularly in the long bones of the legs. While no single Neanderthal gene determines height, the aggregate effect of multiple variants can nudge you up or down the scale. This doesn't mean Neanderthals were short or tall by our standards. It means their biology still nudges the ruler today. Another silent influence. Another whisper from the past. But why do these traits persist? Why, tens of thousands of years after the last Neanderthal vanished, do we still carry their freckles, their hair types, their response to sunlight? Because natural selection doesn't always delete the past. It selects it, preserves what's useful, edits what's harmful. In Europe and parts of Asia, the genes inherited from Neanderthals gave Homo sapiens an edge, adapting faster to the cold, the sun, the seasons. The genes that didn't help, they were gradually removed. This created a genetic patchwork in which only the most beneficial Neanderthal traits survived. Your reflection, then, is a curated portrait not just of your parents and grandparents, but of decisions made by evolution across millennia. And this raises a final humbling idea. We are not purely Homo sapiens. We are the result of mingling, not just of cultures and languages, but of species. We carry ancient signatures on our skin. We wear them every day. Your freckles are not just cute, they're historic. Your skin tone is not just pigment, it is a map of ancient migrations. The ease or difficulty with which you tan isn't random. It's part of a survival strategy designed for a world that no longer exists. And yet, here you are, a living time capsule. So look in the mirror again. Really look. What you see is not just beauty or imperfection, but a portrait of resilience. A canvas painted with the genes of those who thrived when survival was uncertain. A face shaped not just by parents, but by people who hunted mammoths and weathered ice storms. They're with you still, not in memory, but in melanin, in the flicker of your hair in sunlight, in the freckles you wish away or love deeply. Reflections don't lie, and yours whispers of a time when love crossed species and legacy was written in skin. The secret in the mountains, at the roof of the world, where the sky leans closer to earth, Where breath thins and lungs burn, people thrive. Not just survive, not merely endure, but live, love, labour, and laugh 4 kilometres above sea level where oxygen is scarce and the world turns harsh. This is Tibet. And the people who call it home are born with a secret not visible in their faces, not audible in their chants or footsteps on prayer wheels, but written in their blood, a single gene, a mutation, a gift. And it didn't come from their Homo sapiens ancestors. It came from Denisovans. You've likely never met a Denisovan. No one has. We've never seen their skulls in museums. We've never reconstructed their faces. They left behind no painted caves or carved tools. They are in many ways shadows, footnotes in the fossil record, and yet inside millions of living people today, especially among Tibetan populations, Denisovan DNA lives on whispering in the lungs and hearts of those who scale the world's tallest mountains. The gene is called EPAS1. It's the body's high-altitude switch, and it rewrites the rules of survival. To understand the miracle, you have to understand the challenge. At sea level, your lungs fill easily. With each breath, oxygen saturates your blood. Your heart beats steadily. Your brain is clear. But climb into the Himalayas and the world changes. Air thins, oxygen drops by 40%, every breath brings less life. The body panics. For most people, the reaction is universal. Compensate. Produce more red blood cells, flood the bloodstream with oxygen carriers, thicken the blood. But this is a trap. Too many red cells means viscous blood, sluggish flow, a higher risk of stroke, heart attack, and death. It's the body trying to help and hurting you instead. Except in Tibetans, they don't follow this pattern. Their blood stays light, smooth, efficient. They breathe better. Their hearts work smarter. And it's all because of a single inherited mutation in EPAS1, a mutation found almost nowhere else on Earth. Except, strangely, in the genome of an extinct Denisovan. In 2014, a team of researchers studying the Tibetan genome made a startling discovery. The version of EPAS1 that gives Tibetans their high-altitude advantage? It doesn't resemble the version found in other humans, not even close. It matches almost exactly with DNA extracted from a Denisovan finger bone found in Denisova Cave in Siberia. A fragment, no skull, no skeleton. Just a sliver of bone, enough to unlock an ancient secret. That match was too precise to be coincidence. Denisovans, it turned out, had lived at high altitudes themselves, perhaps in Central Asia or on mountain plateaus long forgotten. They had faced the same oxygen-starved environment, and their genes had adapted. Thousands of years later, when modern humans moved north and east out of Africa, they met Denisovans and interbred. And in those shared children, the EPAS1 mutation transferred. A Denisovan survival strategy became a Homo sapiens superpower. Today, that one mutation, silent, ancient, nearly invisible, protects entire populations. Think about what this means. A species known from less than a handful of fossil fragments, a people we never drew on cave walls or etched in memory, still saves lives every day. That is the power of genetic inheritance. That is the reach of extinction defied by biology. The gene itself is fascinating. EPAS1 regulates how the body responds to low oxygen, controlling everything from blood cell production to vascular expansion. In most people, the body reacts to low oxygen by ramping up red blood cell output, a dangerous overreaction at high altitudes. But the Denisovan version of EPAS1 dampens that response. It allows for just enough adaptation to survive without tipping into harm. It's a precision instrument in a world where every breath counts. Tibetan children inherit this from birth. Their bodies don't struggle when they climb. They're not gasping at altitudes that make other people faint. They've inherited a tool made for mountains. And they owe it to ancestors they never met. This is the most clear-cut example we have of archaic introgression, a fancy term for ancient genes helping modern humans adapt to extreme environments. It's not theory. It's not metaphor. It's measurable in hemoglobin levels. It's visible in Tibetan physiology. It's written in the nucleotides of the blood. Without Denisovan DNA, it's possible to bet as we know it would not exist. Nor would the Sherpas of Nepal, who also carry the same mutation, or the highland populations of Bhutan, Mongolia, and parts of China. An entire way of life, pilgrimages, farming, birth and breath, depends on a mutation from a vanished species. And what makes this even more poetic? The Denisovans themselves are mostly unknown. Unlike Neanderthals, we don't have full skeletons, can't reconstruct their faces, we don't know what languages they spoke, if any. We can't even say with certainty where they lived or how far they ranged. Yet their impact lives on, not in their monuments, but in mitochondria, not in their ruins, but in respiration and their greatest legacy may not be what they built, but what they passed on. And this changes how we think about extinction, because Denisovans are by all standard definitions extinct. They no longer exist as a species, they have no territory, no artifacts, no culture, but their genes live in millions of people. Is that truly extinction? Or is it transformation? A species that dissolved into another, but left behind tools and strengths and secrets like the one in the mountains. This chapter of human evolution, this mountain gene, reminds us that survival is often less about invention and more about connection. We didn't conquer the earth alone. We did it with borrowed breath, with lungs that remember the air of ancient caves, with genes that recall climates long vanished. You carry that history with every inhale. So the next time you read about a Sherpa guiding climbers on Everest, or a Tibetan child running barefoot through a hillside village, know that what lets them breathe, what lets them flourish in thin air, comes from people long gone. People we never knew, people who are gone in body but alive in code. The Denisovans never left a temple. They left Epos 1, and that was enough. Sleep like a caveman. Do you find yourself coming alive after dark? When the rest of the world fades into silence, when the noise ebbs and the stars begin their quiet vigil, do you feel a strange kind of focus, a calm alertness, a rhythm that seems to run opposite to the clock? You're not lazy. You're not broken. You may simply be sleeping like a caveman. Our sleep patterns feel so personal, so modern a product of stress, blue light, coffee and schedules. But buried deep within your genes is another story, a rhythm not set by alarm clocks or 9-to-5 jobs, but by Ice Age skies and Neanderthal nights. Because before you ever laid eyes on a digital screen, before electricity rewired your habits, your sleep was guided by the sun and by the ancient clocks inside your cells. And those clocks, some of them were set 47,000 years ago. Modern humans evolved in Africa, close to the equator where night and day divide the world with stunning regularity. 12 hours of sunlight, 12 hours of darkness, every day, all year, generation after generation. Our biology evolved to match that rhythmatidy cycle of wake and sleep, light and rest. But then we left. We moved north, into Europe and Asia. We entered lands where the sun barely rose in winter, or refused to set in summer. And suddenly the neat symmetry of equatorial time shattered. Darkness stretched for months. Light poured in endlessly. How does a species that evolved to sleep with the sun adapt to a land of extremes? The answer, it seems, is that we didn't do it alone. We borrowed from those who came before us, the Neanderthals who had already mastered the night. Recent research has revealed that your circadian rhythm, your internal clock, is not entirely modern. If you're of non-African descent, there's a real chance that the way you sleep, the hours you feel tired, the times you're most alert are influenced by Neanderthal DNA genes that once helped our cousins cope with the polar sun and the eternal twilight, now tick away inside your body, guiding when you rise, when you rest, and when you dream. Let's explore how this works. Your circadian rhythm is a finely tuned biological system. It regulates your sleep-wake cycle, body temperature, hormone release, and even immune function. It's driven by genes, known as clock genes, that respond to light and darkness. Genes like PER1, PER2 clock and BMAL1. In 2021, scientists from Vanderbilt University and the Max Planck Institute analysed thousands of genomes and made a surprising discovery. Neanderthal variants of circadian genes were still present in modern humans, especially among Europeans and Asians. And these variants weren't dormant, they were functioning. Altering the expression of sleep-related hormones like melatonin, shifting the timing of body temperature drops, influencing mood, alertness, and metabolism. One particularly important discovery involved a gene that regulates the sleep phase, the timing of when you feel sleepy or wakeful. In Neanderthals, variants of these genes were shaped by their environment. They lived for hundreds of thousands of years in northern latitudes, facing long winters of darkness and summers of relentless light. To survive, their bodies had to adapt. Sleeping too much in the dark could have made them vulnerable. Rising too late in the extended dawn could have cost them food or safety. And so, their biology evolved to cope. Some became more evening-oriented, staying active after dark, while others adapted to be early risers, maximizing the brief daylight. This flexibility was critical. When Homo sapiens met Neanderthals in Europe and Asia, we did more than share tools and territories. We interbred, and with those intimate unions came genus, including the ones that helped Neanderthals thrive under alien skies. Today, researchers can detect these ancient clock genes in your DNA, and they found that people living far from the equator, those in Europe, Central Asia, Siberia, are more likely to carry Neanderthal variants that influence eveningness. That's right. If you're a night owl in Sweden or Poland or northern India, you may be echoing rhythms that began in a Neanderthal cave beneath a sky veiled in aurora and snow. But this story isn't just about when you sleep. It's also about how you sleep, how deeply, how restfully, how your body prepares for the night and restores itself. Neanderthal genes influence more than timing. They also affect the quality of rest. Some inherited variants have been linked to shorter sleep durations, which may have been an advantage when danger lurked at night. Others regulate melatonin more efficiently, allowing for deeper sleep in shorter windows. The result? A kind of biological resilience, a flexibility in the face of unpredictable light and danger. This ability to adapt your rhythm may have helped modern humans adjust to new climates more quickly and avoid the fatigue, confusion, and sickness that can come with circadian disruption. And then there's the medical side. Circadian rhythms govern not just your sleep, but your metabolism, your appetite, and your immune function. Genes that influence your sleep-wake cycle also affect your body's release of key hormones: insulin, glucose, and leptin, the hormone that tells you when to stop eating. When these cycles fall out of sync, when you're constantly fighting your natural rhythm, you become more vulnerable to diseases like diabetes, obesity, and depression. So, if you've ever blamed your night owl habits for your health challenges, know that the cause might be older than civilization itself. You may be wrestling with biology designed for a darker world, but not all scientists agree on how strong these effects are. Some argue that modern life, diet, stress, artificial light, plays a larger role in our sleep than ancient genes. And they're right to some degree. Your circadian rhythm is the product of nature and nurture. Genes may set the baseline, but environment tunes the symphony. Still, the influence of Neanderthal DNA remains detectable. You carry a version of their ancient biology. It shapes how you rest, how you recover, how you cope with the turning of the earth. And it reminds us that we are not blank slates. We are palimpsest-layered histories written in the language of cells and sleep. So tonight, when you lie in bed and your mind sharpens instead of softens, and the world seems quieter, clearer, know this: you're not out of sync, you're not alone. You may simply be hearing an older rhythm, a pulse from the past, a lullaby sung in Ice Age night. The Neanderthal in your genome hasn't left you. He's watching the stars with you. You don't sleep late. You sleep ancient. When evolution deletes the past, you carry the past in your blood. Every heartbeat echoes with prehistoric rhythm. Every breath whispers a fragment of ancient inheritance. And yet you're not a Neanderthal. Not quite. Not anymore. Because most of their genes are gone not by accident, not by forgetting, but by choice. Not yours, not theirs, but nature's. A quiet, relentless force has been at work for tens of thousands of years, editing, trimming, cutting the threads that no longer fit the modern design. This is the story of how evolution doesn't just shape the future, it deletes the past. When Homo sapiens met Neanderthals and Denisovans, they did more than share fire and shelter. They shared bodies, they shared children, and those children carried hybrid DNA, a genetic cocktail of ancient lineages, blending for the first time in history. For a moment, evolution allowed it all, the strong and the strange, the brilliant and the broken. But that moment was brief, because nature is not sentimental, it is efficient, and in the millennia that followed, a silent war unfolded inside our DNA between the ancient and the new. At first glance, it seemed that our ancestors had kept quite a lot. 1% to 2% Neanderthal DNA in nearly every non-African genome, tens of millions of base pairs, enough to influence sleep, immunity, even how your skin reacts to sunlight. But when geneticists looked closer, they noticed something odd. Entire stretches of our DNA were mysteriously empty of Neanderthal genes. Regions that should have contained fragments from our ancient cousins had none, not a single echo, not a trace. These were called Neanderthal deserts, places in the modern human genome where Neanderthal DNA had been wiped out systematically, consistently, across vast populations. Why? Because some of that ancient inheritance wasn't helpful. It was toxic. You see, interbreeding doesn't guarantee compatibility. When two species or subspecies mix, their offspring can inherit combinations of genes that don't work well together, like trying to fit a square cog into a round gear. Individually, the genes may function, but together they create genetic chaos. This is called genetic incompatibility, and it's a cornerstone of evolutionary biology. In the case of Neanderthal Homo sapiens hybrids, some of these incompatible gene combos disrupted critical processes, especially in sensitive systems like brain development, reproduction, fertility, embryonic growth. In short, some Neanderthal genes made us weaker, not stronger, and nature took notice. Natural selection went to work like a ruthless editor. It kept what worked, and it erased what didn't. Across generations, harmful Neanderthal variants were silenced, removed, or mutated out of existence. Their presence decreased in each successive wave of human birth, until only fragments remained, and even those were confined to safe corners of our genome. This process wasn't random, it was targeted. The genes most frequently deleted were those involved in cognition and neural development, testes function and sperm production, language-related regions of the brain. It's as if evolution was telling a story. You can borrow their skin, you can borrow their sleep, you can even borrow their immune strength, but not their mind, not their future. That is yours alone. Studies show that Neanderthal DNA is almost entirely absent from the X chromosome, the chromosome crucial to reproduction, especially male fertility. That's not a coincidence. Many hybrid offspring likely suffered reproductive issues, making them less likely to pass on their genes. Over time, the Neanderthal contribution to those areas shrank to nothing. Other deserts appeared in regions of the genome tied to speech and language development. Neanderthal DNA may have interfered with how the modern brain processes complex vocal communication. Again, nature pruned, erased, refined. What remains today is a curated archive, the greatest hits of caveman DNA. What you carry isn't a full genetic memory. It's a filtered legacy, And yet, what survived tells its own tale. Skin pigmentation, immune defenses, sleep patterns, metabolic adaptations. These are the traits that mattered most to survival in strange northern lands. They were the tools we needed in the short term. What we rejected, what nature deleted, were the parts that clashed with the trajectory of a brain growing more complex, a society growing more sophisticated, a species preparing to build cities, art, and space telescopes. Neanderthal intelligence was real, but our evolution took a different road, one that couldn't afford the detours. And yet, this deletion wasn't cruelty, it was conservation. Natural selection didn't erase the past to forget it, it trimmed the excess so we could grow. The process was not a rejection of Neanderthals, but a refinement of the union. Evolution isn't always addition. Sometimes it's subtraction that saves. There's something humbling in this. Your body is a museum of ancient edits. You are the product of not just who your ancestors were, but of what they were not allowed to remain. The DNA that fills your cells is only part of the story. The real shape of you also lies in the empty spaces, the deserts where incompatible genes once tried to take root and were carefully swept away. The story of who you are includes all the almosts, the genes that nearly stayed, the variants that almost shaped your mind, the Neanderthal echoes that were too loud to keep, and yet, even in their absence, they taught us something. They taught us what it means to adapt. So when you wonder how close we truly are to our extinct cousins, remember this: we shared blood, we shared breath, we shared genes. But we did not share destiny. Nature made sure of that. The patchwork genome. Your genome is not a seamless story. It is not a smooth line or a single thread. It is a patchwork, a stitched-together mosaic made of ancient memory and recent innovation. If your DNA were a tapestry, some sections would shimmer with prehistoric light woven with the fibers of Neanderthal inheritance. Other sections would be eerily blank silent zones, untouched by the past. This is not a glitch. This is evolution's intention. And in the folds of that patchwork lies a question. Why? Why are some parts of your genetic code saturated with caveman DNA, while others remain pristine, as if Neanderthals had never existed? What created this uneven terrain? The answer is a story of conflict, cooperation, and natural selection, an evolutionary drama playing out in the spiral staircases of your cells. When researchers first sequenced the Neanderthal genome in 2010, they expected to find scattered fragments inside modern humans, and they did. But what they didn't expect was the pattern. They saw that some parts of the genome had dense clusters of Neanderthal sequences, like archaeological layers packed with relics. Other parts? Complete deserts, not a single trace. As if evolution had swept through with a broom and cleaned the shelves. It wasn't random. These Neanderthal hot zones and cold zones were remarkably consistent across populations in Europe and Asia. Even separated by thousands of years and continents, the story was the same: rich patches of Neanderthal DNA next to strangely empty zones. This was not genetic drift. This was selection at work. Let's explore what those patches mean. In the zones where Neanderthal DNA survived, researchers found genes tied to skin and hair pigmentation, immune system responses, fat metabolism and body shape, circadian rhythms and sleep preferences. These traits made sense in an Ice Age world. Imagine an early Homo sapiens stepping into Europe, dark-skinned, sun-adapted, fresh from the tropics and suddenly surrounded by snow, fog and cold. Their melanin-rich skin couldn't synthesize enough vitamin D. Their immune system had never encountered European pathogens. Their metabolism wasn't built for long winters or short harvests. But the Neanderthals had been there for hundreds of thousands of years. Their bodies were tuned to the cold. Their immune systems had battled Eurasian diseases. Their skin and fat distribution helped them survive. So, when interbreeding happened, Neanderthal genes offered shortcuts, pre-adapted solutions for a harsh, unfamiliar land. and natural selection said, keep this. Those gene variants spread, they took root. They helped early modern humans survive, reproduce, and thrive. This is why your genome still carries echoes of ancient winters in how you tan, how you sleep, even how you store fat. But what about the voids, the deserts? The regions where Neanderthal DNA seems forbidden? Those areas tell another story, a story of rejection. These are the places where Neanderthal genes didn't help, they harmed. And so they were eliminated. Researchers have identified that the Neanderthal free zones of our genome often overlap with genes involved in brain development, cognitive function, speech and language, reproductive biology. These are high-stakes areas of the human genome. Small changes can have massive effects. A tiny tweak in a neural gene can alter memory, emotion or intelligence. A mutation in a reproductive gene can affect fertility or viability. Neanderthal variants in these regions, when passed on to modern humans, often cause genetic incompatibility malfunctions, reduced fitness, or lower fertility. So natural selection intervened, fast. Generation after generation, the harmful Neanderthal variants in those regions were scrubbed out. The result? Deserts. Silent, untouched spaces where the past tried to enter but the future closed the door. This genomic patchwork, the blend of ancient retention and modern rejection, has a name in science: adaptive introgression. It's a process by which some foreign genes are integrated because they offer advantages, while others are purged because they don't fit. It's like downloading software from an old machine. Some files are compatible, they run just fine. Others crash your system. You keep what works, you delete the rest. That's what your body did. This concept is not unique to Neanderthal DNA. We see similar patchwork patterns in plants, animals, even viruses. Anytime species exchange genes, selection becomes the filter, the editor, the artist that shapes the final portrait. But in humans, it carries a special significance, because this patchwork isn't just a reflection of survival, it's a reflection of identity. We are not Neanderthals, but we are not purely Homo sapiens either. We are a blend, a mosaic, a collage of ancient experiments that evolution chose to preserve. You're a creature of layers, your genome stitched together by millennia of trial and error. And yet, within this patchwork lies beauty. You carry the DNA of firelit nights, of bone tools and mammoth hunts. You carry the memory of cave songs, of frost-bitten dawns, of migrations that redrew the shape of human destiny. But you also carry absences, silent spaces where something once tried to belong and couldn't. Those absences are just as powerful. They are the lines evolution chose not to write. They are what make your brain think as it does. They are why your species paints, writes, dreams, and launches rockets. They are what make you see you. So the next time you look at a strand of DNA, don't imagine a single unbroken chain. Imagine a quilt, a lattice of inherited memories stitched together with judgment and grace. Some patches are old, some are new, some are dark, others light. Some are loud with Neanderthal voices, others are completely silent. Together they make a pattern no species on Earth has ever matched. The patchwork genome, ancient, selective, human, debating the caveman within. Somewhere inside your genome, a campfire still glows. Flickering in the darkness of time, its warmth lingers in fragments, echoes of Neanderthal lives that ended long ago but never truly vanished. You carry their DNA, that much is certain. But how much of it matters? That is the question. And in labs and lecture halls around the world, scientists continue to argue over the answer. Is the Neanderthal within you still shaping your health, your thoughts, your days beneath the sun? Or are these ancient genes mere evolutionary static, leftover code quietly fading with each passing generation? This is the great debate of human genetics, not whether we inherited the past, but how deeply it still holds us. Let's begin with what we know. Nearly all non-African people alive today carry 1–2% Neanderthal DNA. In total, more than 60 million letters of prehistoric code are still present in the average human genome. That's not a footnote, it's a library. We've traced these genes to key traits: how we sleep, how we tan, how we respond to viruses, even how we metabolize fat or experience depression. And yet, their effects are often modest shadows, not spotlights. According to geneticist Tony Capra, Neanderthal DNA tends to have subtle impacts detectable only in large population studies. It's not that these genes don't matter, it's that they matter quietly. One study found that people carrying certain Neanderthal gene variants were more likely to be night owls. Their internal clocks tuned to ancient rhythms from Ice Age Europe. Another discovered a link between Neanderthal DNA and the body's immune response to RNA viruses like influenza and coronaviruses. These findings suggest that ancient DNA shapes the edges of our biology, not all at once, not loudly, but persistently. It's like a whisper passed down from 47,000 years ago, nudging your body here, guiding a gene expression there. These genes don't shout, they whisper through time, but not everyone agrees that we should be listening so closely. In Iceland, a sweeping study of tens of thousands of people found no statistically significant connection between Neanderthal DNA and traits like hair colour, freckles, or autoimmunity. According to the researchers, the influence of modern human genetic variation appears far more significant than anything left behind by extinct cousins. To some scientists, this means Neanderthal DNA is mostly noise, the echo of an evolutionary experiment that barely registered, as one critic put it. Just because a gene comes from Neanderthals doesn't make it important. But others caution against such a narrow view. Evolution, after all, does not always operate in bold strokes. Sometimes it works through accumulation of 1,000 small ripples becoming a tide. An ancient DNA may not be about single dramatic mutations, but combinations of subtle changes that together shape human health, behaviour and survival. Geneticist Joshua Akey argues that we're still just scratching the surface. The true impact of Neanderthal genes may not be obvious in the lab today, but could become critical under stress in disease or in changing environments. Think of it like inherited armour. You don't notice it every day, but when the virus comes knocking, when the temperature drops, when your sleep is disrupted, those ancient tools may step forward and go to work. Then there's the question of where these genes still influence us. The effect of Neanderthal DNA isn't uniform. It varies by population, by environment, by genetic context. A gene variant helpful in the Himalayas may be irrelevant in the Amazon. What helps a Northern European immune system could harm an East Asian one. This means Neanderthal DNA isn't just ancient, it's personal. Its effects are situational, dependent on the grand interplay between old code and new life. And so, some researchers now believe the real answer lies in complexity, not in dismissing ancient genes as unimportant, nor in romanticizing them as a primal blueprint. Instead, we must learn to read them as nuance, as historical footnotes that still write margin notes in our biology. One of the most fascinating areas of this debate is in mental health. Recent studies have found weak but consistent associations between Neanderthal variants and depression risk, nicotine addiction, mood instability, sleep disorders. None of these links are decisive. None are universal. But they suggest that Neanderthal DNA may still shape the architecture of your brain, just enough to tilt a mood, influence a habit, shift the emotional weather of your day. It's subtle, but it's there, like fog from an old fire, drifting through the corridors of your mind. So, what do we make of all this? Is the Neanderthal inside you a genetic footnote or a quiet co-author of your daily experience? The truth may lie somewhere in between. Neanderthal DNA is not destiny. It doesn't control you. It doesn't define you. But it's part of you just as much as your eye colour, your laugh, or the scar on your knee. It's part of a longer story, a story of two species who once met under strange skies, who shared fire and blood and left behind something permanent. You. In the end, the debate is not just about genes, it's about identity. It's about where we come from and who we still are. Science will continue to map the shadows, to test the signals and silence, to decide whether the caveman within us is a whisper or a voice. But for now, each time you dream, each time you heal, each time your body adapts to something new, know that somewhere deep inside, a fragment of a forgotten world is still at work. A gene from a cousin whose name you never knew, an ancient tool passed down through love, chance and survival. You may never hear it, but it's there, still speaking, still part of the chorus. The mongrel blueprint. Take a long breath. Hold it. The air inside your lungs touches biology that is not just human, but hybrid. Your bones are shaped by journeys made across continents. Your bloodline tangled in forgotten forests. Your mind sharpened not by one ancestry, but many. You're not a pure species. You're a mosaic, a living collaboration of cousins long extinct. And that, paradoxically, may be the reason you're here at all. For generations, scientists clung to a cleaner narrative, that Homo sapiens emerged in Africa, evolved alone, and outcompeted all other human species by superior intellect or divine spark. We were the chosen ones, the last branch on the hominin tree that didn't snap. But DNA had other ideas. When researchers began decoding the genomes of ancient humans, Neanderthals in Europe, Denisovans in Asia, they found something astonishing. They hadn't disappeared entirely. They had become part of us. Their genes were woven into our genome, not as fossils, but as active code influencing our immunity, our sleep, our appearance, our survival. What does that make us? Not victors, not survivors, hybrids. Let's not be afraid of the word. Mongrel. It's often used as an insult, a word that implies impurity, dilution, a weakening of the blood. But in biology, hybridity is power. Hybrids bring genetic diversity. They mix toolkits, they borrow strengths. They are the ones who endure when the world shifts, because they are not locked into one way of being. You're not Homo sapiens singular. You're Homo sapiens plus Neanderthal, plus Denisovan, plus threads from hominins we haven't even identified yet, ghost lineages hiding in your chromosomes, like secrets whispered across millennia. You're a collaborative project drafted not by one species alone, but by a chorus of evolutionary voices. Why does this matter? Because the hybrid model changes everything we thought we knew about what it means to be human. It means survival wasn't about conquest, it was about connection. It wasn't just Homo sapiens versus Neanderthals in a fight for dominance. It was two species meeting at the edge of the Ice Age, sharing fire, language, tools, and eventually, love. It was interbreeding, but it was also interlearning. We didn't just take their genes, we likely took their ideas, their technologies, their stories. In caves and forests long erased, children were born who carried both bloodlines, the strong arms of Neanderthals, the wandering curiosity of Sapiens, and those children grew up and wandered further still. Their descendants would span deserts, sail oceans, build cities, send machines into the stars. The very flexibility that defines our species, our adaptability, our curiosity, our resilience, may come not from being singular, but from being multiple. A single species might master one climate, one disease, one diet. But a hybrid species, it inherits entire catalogues of solutions. When Homo sapiens left Africa, we faced new pathogens, freezing climates, high altitudes, seasonal darkness, variable food sources. If we had met these challenges alone, our survival would have been uncertain. But we weren't alone. We encountered people who had lived in those conditions for hundreds of thousands of years. And when we interbred with them, we didn't just pass on DNA feed downloaded adaptation, like a software update. Neanderthal genes for fighting local viruses, Denisovan genes for surviving low oxygen air, skin tone variations, sleep rhythms suited for long northern nights. And slowly, that patchwork turned into a blueprint. The hybrid blueprint is not perfect. There were incompatibilities. Some Neanderthal DNA caused health problems, autoimmune risks, metabolic issues, even fertility barriers. Natural selection edited much of it out. But what remained? The useful, the efficient, the traits that helped us adapt and still help us today. Science calls this adaptive introgression. But in human terms, it's something more poetic, evolutionary collaboration. This hybrid model also humbles us. It reminds us that we are not the endpoint of some grand hierarchy. We are not the pinnacle of perfection. We are the result of a messy, beautiful exchange, a tangle of encounters under moonlight, a mingling of minds and bodies, a long dialogue across deep time. Even now, we carry within us the evidence of those unions in the lining of your lungs, in the resilience of your white blood cells, in the colour of your eyes when sunlight hits just right. Even your circadian rhythm, whether you're a night owl or early riser, may be a whisper from the Neanderthal genome. Some scientists estimate that taken together, modern non-Africans today carry up to 50% of the Neanderthal genome not in any one person, but distributed collectively across humanity. We are like puzzle pieces scattered across time, each of us holding a shard of a lost people. The full picture doesn't live in one body, it lives in all of us, together. That is the true legacy of hybrid humanity. So next time someone invokes purity as a virtue, remember your mongrel DNA. It's not a flaw, it's a superpower. It's a library of survival strategies passed down not through battle, but through encounter, through genes exchanged in whispered languages, in shared shelter, in unexpected love. You're not Homo sapiens alone. You're a multi-species symphony, a masterpiece written across continents and caves, across love stories and migrations. You're not less for being a blend. You're more. You're proof that nature doesn't reward isolation. It rewards openness, and in your bones, in your breath, in the warm rhythm of your heartbeat, the Neanderthal lives, the Denisovan breathes, the ancient world sings. The ghosts that made us, breathe in. Right now, with every inhale, your lungs may be drawing strength from a being whose face we've never seen. A ghost lives in your blood. Not metaphor, but biology. Not myth, but inheritance. Somewhere, thousands of years ago, on a windswept plateau or beneath a mountain cave, your ancestors met someone. Not Homo sapiens, not Neanderthal, but another kind of human, and they didn't fight. They stayed. They mingled, and through that ancient union, you became you. We call them Denisovans, a name born not of myth or legend, but of a cave in Siberia, Denisova caveware. In 2010, scientists uncovered a bone, a fingertip. That was all, a single finger bone from a young girl, delicate, silent, ancient, dated to over 50,000 years ago. But from that tiny fragment a revolution began, because when they sequenced her DNA they found something shocking. This was not a Neanderthal, not a modern human. It was a third kind of hominina cousin we'd never met before, a human who had vanished from the world but not from our genes. We have no full skulls, no skeletons, no cave art, just slivers of molar tooth here, a bit of jaw there, and that one mysterious finger. And yet that ghost girl changed our understanding of human evolution. Because her DNA is still alive in millions of people today. Not in Siberia, but in Tibet, in Papua New Guinea, across Southeast Asia, in indigenous Australians, and deep in the Andaman Islands. Populations separated by vast oceans and mountains, yet all carrying the same ancient signature. Let's pause and consider what that means. We've mapped the genome of a species we've never fully seen, and that genome helped modern humans survive the impossible. At 4,000 meters above sea level, where oxygen is scarce and the cold bites deep, Tibetans thrive. Their secret? A single gene variant, EPAS1, which regulates the body's response to low oxygen. Where did it come from? Not from Homo sapiens, not from Neanderthals, from Denisovans. This ghost of a people, known only from bone dust and genetic echoes, is the reason entire civilizations can breathe on the roof of the world. Not extinct, just dispersed, like pollen on the wind. Scientists call these moments adaptive introgressions, genes borrowed from archaic humans that helped our species survive new environments. Denisovan genes didn't just influence altitude, they also touch, immune system responses, fat metabolism. Even the shape of the face and jaw. In some Pacific Island populations, up to 5% of the genome may be Denisovan. In some isolated communities, even 6%. That's 3 times more than the average Neanderthal contribution to Europeans. But here's the mystery. We barely know what Denisovans looked like. Every time we extract another fragment from a cave floor, we learn something astonishing. The Denisovans were not a single population. They were likely a network of groups spread from the icy Altai to the humid tropics of Southeast Asia. They were diverse, they were mobile, and they lived in places where preservation is poor, where humid air and acidic soil erase bones faster than we can find them. In other words, they were everywhere, and we almost never knew they existed. That's the haunting beauty of genetic archaeology. It shows us not just what we remember, but what we forgot. So what else might we be missing? If Denisovans lived from Siberia to the Pacific, what of the humans in India? What of Southeast Asia's rainforests? What of islands that flooded after the last ice age? And then there's the biggest mystery of all. In African genomes, scientists have found traces of archaic DNA that doesn't match Homo sapiens, doesn't match Neanderthals, doesn't match Denisovans. It matches no known species. They call it ghost DNA. A signal from a vanished branch of the human family, one we haven't even named, a whisper in the blood, telling us that the story of our evolution is far from finished. This changes how we see ourselves. We are not the lone survivors. We are not the singular species. We are the final draft of a manuscript written by many hands. We are the breath of Denisova, the memory of a girl whose name we'll never know, whose people left behind only fragments and yet reshape the fate of entire continents. And here's the wonder of it. Your body may still carry her voice. That gene that helps you breathe, fight infection, digest food, or rest under unfamiliar starset may have come from a people we never even saw. That's the legacy of Denisovans. They remind us that we're built not just from stories we tell, but from stories we've lost, from fingerprints in dust, from kisses in caves, from unions no one recorded but that still echo in your every heartbeat. So, when we say the past is dead, we're wrong. Some of it still walks with you, sleeps with you, wakes with you. The Denisovans are gone from the fossil record, but they live in the altitude of Tibet, in the blood of the Sherpas, in the genetic script of islanders and mountain dwellers and quiet strangers you'll never meet. They are not mythology, they are you. They are the ghosts that made us, the legacy in your blood. Close your eyes for a moment. Now listen to your body, not the world outside, but the quiet world within, the soft rhythm of your heart, the steady pull of breath, the rise and fall of thoughts as sleep approaches. What powers this machinery? Not just muscle and bone, not just food and air, but memory, genetic memory. The legacy of thousands of years lives in your blood. Each cell in your body holds a library 3 billion letters of DNA, written not just by your parents, but by your ancestors' ancestors. And some of those ancestors were Neanderthals. Some were Denisovans, some were other humans we haven't yet named. They loved, they hurt, they adapted, they survived. And somehow, through all the fire and frost, through ice ages and migrations, through diseases that killed millions and cliffs that swallowed empires they passed their story on. To you. So the next time your immune system fends off a virus, know this. It's using ancient blueprints, a toolkit built by bodies long turned to dust. Genes inherited from Neanderthals still help modern humans fight off RNA viruses just as they did tens of thousands of years ago when Ice Age plagues swept the Mammoth Plains. You weren't there, but your DNA remembers, and when your body fights for you, it fights not alone. It fights with the strength of 1,000 generations, with strategies honed under foreign stars. When you walk outside and feel the sun on your skin, how easily you tan or burn is part of the same legacy. Some of your pigmentation genes come from humans who lived far from the African equator, from Neanderthals with light and dark skin tones, adapting to European winters and Asian forests. They gifted us genetic tools to manage ultraviolet radiation, to protect skin from long winter shadows, and to absorb enough light in places where the sun rarely rose high. Your freckles, your hair colour, the way your skin responds to summer sun, these too are messages in the blood, echoes of survival, marks of inheritance. And then there's sleep. Have you ever wondered why you come alive after dark when others drift off by 9? Why your body seems synced not to the clock but to the moon? That, too, might be ancestral. Some Neanderthal circadian units adapted for long cold winters and short bursts of lights. Still shape the sleep rhythms of millions today. Science shows your circadian cycle isn't just about habits or personality. It's about DNA forged in places where darkness lasted for months and survival meant learning to thrive under stars. So when you toss and turn, or rise effortlessly before dawn, remember, you're dancing to a rhythm older than civilization. High in the mountains of Tibet, a gene from Denisovans helps people breathe. It's called EPAS1 and it allows their blood to carry oxygen efficiently without becoming too thick. Without it, most of us would suffer at altitudes above 4,000 meters, with fatigue, nausea, even death. But Sherpas and highland farmers live, work and laugh there, because of a single ancient variant passed down through love, through the blending of human and ghost human. A love story no one recorded, but one your DNA still remembers. Every time you heal, every time you adapt, every time you survive, you're honouring those who came before you, not with words, not with statues, but with breath, blood, and resilience. The Neanderthal and Denisovan genes you carry aren't fossils, they are living instructions, active participants in your biology. They helped you survive the flu. They shaped your skin's response to the sun. They determine whether you're a night owl or early bird. They influence how you process fat, how you sense pain, even how your immune system reacts to new threats. They are the quiet protectors of your modern life. But even more than that, they're proof of a deeper truth. Humanity was never pure, not a single line, not a single race, not a single origin untouched. We were always a braid woven from many strands, from Africa to Asia to Europe to Oceania. We mixed, we mingled, we merged, and it was that openness, not isolation, that made us strong. When our ancestors left Africa, they didn't just carry their own genes, they picked up new ones, adapted to new lands, borrowed survival strategies from those already thriving there, and by doing so, they gave birth to you. So take pride in the 1-2%, that fraction of your genome that carries the spark of Neanderthals, that echo of Denisovans, that soft whisper of ghost lineages yet unnamed. Those numbers may seem small, but inside each strand are millions of base pairs, tens of millions of ancient letters that shaped your form, your fight, your fire. And no two people carry the same pattern, which means somewhere inside you might be the only surviving version of a gene from a lost tribe. You may be the last living echo of a love that bloomed under Ice Age stars. In a world obsessed with the newest, you carry the oldest story, one written in bone, etched into blood, read by the light of mitochondria and the flicker of immune cells. You're not just a product of modern evolution. You're a vessel of ancient memory, a walking archive, a breathing monument, a mosaic of time and love and survival. This is the legacy in your blood, and it beats with every single heartbeat.